Welcome to Mideast Realities. I'm your host, Mark Bruzonsky. We have an exceptional opportunity today. We're in New York City. We're at the MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan, not far from Chinatown. And the opportunity we have is to talk to MOUSA Abu Marzook, who has been held here for over a year now. He's the political head of Hamas. He has lived in the United States for, I believe, 14 years. And he was arrested at Kennedy Airport in July of 1995 because of his role as political head of the Palestinian Hamas organization. And we are in the prison facility awaiting Dr. Abu Marzook, and we have a chance today to talk about the events taking place in the Middle East with one of the important participants. My understanding is that Dr. Marzook negotiated on behalf of Hamas with Yasser Arafat in the early days of the Oslo Agreement, when Arafat and the Fatah people came to Gaza. And he was free to travel around the world on behalf of Hamas up until July of 1995, when his name appeared on a watch list as he tried to re-enter this country with his family, something apparently he had done many times before without any problems, but there have been new laws and changes in the political climate, and he was arrested that evening and has been held, I believe, in this facility ever since. So thank you for tuning in. As you know, I'm your host, Mark Bruzonsky, and this program appears on this channel on this day of the week at this time every week.
They can't. And we carry anyway the Egyptian travel documents. This kind of documents is very difficult.
They don't get you very far.
Yeah, and nobody accepts those kind of documents to leave them as a resident in their country. And then I stuck in months. I can't move there as just a visitor. When I get my green card, gave me more opportunity to move by American documents.
And when did you get your green card?
At 1990.
1990?
No, it's September 90, I guess. And I got my green card through lottery. My wife.
Oh, yes, that's right. I read that. You were lucky.
Yeah, my wife, she's lucky here. Yeah, she submitted the paper and she went, and that one, all of my family got a green card. Not all, because 4 of them, they are American born here and they have American citizenship anyway. To try, you see, to move here, others to help my people from that time. But most of my work concentrated in the education stuff, because I am one of the one who founded the Gaza Strip University.
Yours is down here if you decide you want it.
Okay, thank you. I'm one of those people who as a founder for Gaza Strip, which is Gaza Strip University, which is the only university in Gaza Strip at that time, and it is the second largest university in West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Yeah. Now, I've been to Gaza. In fact, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a movie made called Gaza Ghetto, which is about, now there's a movie being made called Gaza Prison, but so I'm familiar with the situation. I've been to beach camp, and of course...
By the way, it's a prison a long time ago, but maybe now it's worse. But always Gaza Strip siege like this, you see, a long time ago. It's 1 million people there in just 360 square kilometers.
Right, and in the years I went, there were no hotels. The only place was Mrs. Shaw's Marna house for people like me. And we'd stay a few days and then we'd leave, of course. But if we can get, you obviously at some point, there's no question that you're the political head of Hamas. So at some point, you became active in Hamas. And when was that? You were living in this country. When did you take on this role?
You see, Hamas, as you know, or some people know, she's not just hierarchy organization. It is the Palestinian hope, and it's the people who work for the Palestinian in a certain way. They call them as the Hamas people. When the Israeli government took out 416 people from Western and Gaza Strip to South Lebanon as the deportees at that time.
93?
93. It was a big problem for those people who decided to stay in South Lebanon under hazard weather there. And there is a negotiation start at that time between among all Palestinians. Exactly at that time, you see the people decide, the figure people in Hamas, they decide me to go and make a negotiation under this title, and I went to Middle East, I guess to Tunis at that time.
At the time, Yasser Arafat was in Tunis.
Yeah, and at that time I decided to work as the political leader of Hamas. They decide, not me. They decide to represent that. And this is the starting point for work of Hamas, negotiation with Yasser Arafat at that time.
It's in those years that you first met Yasser Arafat?
No, I met him many times before, because one of the leaders of the army there is my friend, my brother, and he is close to Yasser Arafat anyway, and there is a relationship between
Your brother is still close to Yasser Arafat?
Yeah,
he's in his authority?
Yeah, he's one of the big, he's a general.
A big shot in the authority.
Yeah, big shot. Yeah, he's the head of civilian defense in Gaza Strip and West Bank.
So he's not in Hamas then?
No.
So your family is divided between Fatah and Hamas too?
No, this is a Palestinian situation. Now there is a people more than in Hamas, more than belong to Hamas than Fatah right now. But the Fatah now control the area.
Well, now I know you're a diplomat, and I know, we're meeting for the first time, so the tendency will be to, what we call in America, pull one's punches. But tell me about Yasser Arafat, what do you really think of him? And more importantly, about the authority that he has established.
You see, Yasser Arafat is who is in the middle of Palestinian question from the beginning. As a student, he's the first student represent the Palestinian in West Europe. We hear on the Palestinian student union at that time. And when he finished his engineering school in Cairo University, he made another organization as the graduation student for Palestine. And after that he established Fatah organization. And you see, most of his companions who established Fatah, assassination or they get killed. Now he's the only one who has the biggest reputation among the Palestinian anyway, and he has a lot of relationship among the Arabic world and the rest of the world. Arafat, after what happened to the Palestinian in different years, after Lebanon and after what's happened in Gulf War, he decided to change his position from fighting for his homeland and struggling for that to make this opportunity or to make this goal by peace. When he made this position, I know there is a lot of pressure, and he doesn't have any influence or any power to resist any kind of resistance against that. Then he accepted to come to this situation to make peace, and there is precondition for him to make that peace, to lift out everything he has before he come to the table. He left the armed struggle. He recognized Israel have right to exist. He accept step by step to solve the problems. He accepts many things. I would say it is very difficult after that to accomplish any good after he left everything and then come to negotiate. We negotiate with somebody without any kind of power, just hope or just trust the other one. That means you put all of the paper in front of him, that's all. And that's what's happening to Yasser Arafat right now. When he ran the Palestinian Authority now, he just now looking for
It's more than that, isn't he? Isn't he arresting and torturing
another situation? This is a Palestinian question. This is because of his situation, or because he accepted that peace accord, the Palestinians divided sharply between what he think and what they want to. The Palestinians thought they're going to lose everything. Then most of the Palestinians, not only Hamas, most of the organization which is working with Yasser Arafat since establishing PLO, they working with him shoulder to shoulder. They refused to come with Yasser Arafat in this peace accord. And either in Fatah organization itself, there is a big question, and it is also divided in two parts. That means most of the Palestinians didn't recognize what Yasser Arafat did. Most of the Palestinians, most of them. And the other, they made a very good picture in front of them, and they lying on the Palestinian when they said we're going to have a state of Palestine, we're going to have Jerusalem again, the Israeli army going to withdraw from West Bank and Gaza Strip, and those 20% of Palestinians, they accept the peace accord, they accept because they thought they're going to have something at least Gaza Strip and West Bank as a Palestinian state. And right now, the reality comes.
It's your belief then that the Palestinians are entitled to armed struggle against the Israelis because the Israelis continue to occupy parts of Palestine?
Look, in the history, the Palestinian people, they never rise or they never be struggling against any people before. They control by many other people, as a Palestinian. They never struggle against Turkish, for example. They live with the Turkish government there without struggle, armed struggle. And they live with the Great British at that time, they occupied Palestine. They didn't, even though at that time they didn't struggle, armed struggle with the British occupation at that time. And the Jewish themselves, they used to live in Palestine and in the other Islamic ports at that time without any problems. My father for example, he used to work with Jewish family close to my homeland, my village.
You mean before the Jewish state?
Before Jewish state. There is no any kind of conflict between the people who live in Palestine. You see, because their religion is Jewish or Muslim or Christian.
But there has been no struggle now for 2 generations.
What's happened? Yeah, what's happened when the Palestinians kicked out of their countries at that time? Most of 750,000 Palestinians kicked out to the outside Palestine, and some of them lived in Gaza Strip and West Bank, and most of them they thought they're gonna be there for just 1 month, 2 months, and return back to their home. Nobody at that time thought he's gonna lift his homeland.
I really don't want to deal with the history so much as with the present.
A very important one, because it is a very dangerous issue that the United States has placed under arrest an innocent individual who actually is centered within an organization which is Hamas. The organization itself is centered within the Islamic context, or the Arab-Israeli conflict in the Middle East, which itself is centered within the overall Islamic politicization process that is going on afoot and has been for the past decade and a half. Now, when you pick on an individual like this, you arrest him at an airport without any evidence or without any proof that he has violated any of the laws of this land, and then you have him behind bars ever since the end of July last year, 1995, for a period of about roughly 9 months now, without anyone sort of being aware that this is going on. That in and of itself is indicative of a very dangerous process of arresting a person like that.
But people are aware. The Israelis say he's a terrorist. The American government has declared Hamas a terrorist organization. It's not that people who want to find out aren't aware. The question is, why should the average American really give a damn?
Well, people are aware, yes, but let's not confuse the forest for the trees. There are the politically initiated, those who are really tuned into the Middle Eastern issue, the Arab-Israeli conflict, on any side of this issue, they are aware of this. But when we come to the American public, it's not the Mr. Normal and Average out there who's aware that MOUSA Abu Marzook is behind bars.
That's why we're doing this program.
Okay, so that's one of the issues I think that is not in proportion to the act itself. Media-wise, there's no match for a serious violation of law due process, as is the case of arresting Dr. MOUSA Abu Marzook. That's number one. Number two, let me zero in on what concerns every American. What concerns every American is obviously the economic well-being of this country. Americans really are not bothered by some individual becoming a political issue between two sides of the Middle Eastern conflict. This is not new. It's happened before. It's probably going to happen again. So as far as this is concerned, the Americans probably are not going to be affected by an argument that swings both ways. But what the Americans may be concerned of is when we begin to jeopardize the flow of oil from the Middle East, and they're going to begin to have lines of oil at the gas stations. They're going to begin to be concerned about the rising price of oil and everything that goes with oil, because the industrial complex is really lubricated by oil in many respects. And so in that regard, I think the issue of detaining Dr. MOUSA Abu Marzook, placed in the context of other developments that are going on, such as placing another Islamic scholar behind bars here in the United States, coupled with the general...
You mean the Sheikh from Egypt?
Yes, right. In addition to the general atmosphere of trying to pursue Muslims in this country just because they have become politically aware of the Arab-Israeli conflict. You have right now the anti-terrorism bill that's been a matter of trying to make it through Congress.
Let's come back to that, because that's a very important development. But Dr. Ahmed, why should Americans care? Why do you think Americans should care?
Well, actually, I was going to get on that issue, because I think the reason that Americans should care is that this particular violation of civil liberties is merely symptomatic of a trend that's going on in the United States today. And what we see is that the civil liberties of all Americans are in jeopardy. Looking at the particulars of the case, certainly being detained, being arrested without charge is something that if it happened to your neighbor, any American would be very upset by this. You can't hold people without charge in this country. The idea that he's being held for such a long period of time, if someone is accused of something, terrorism, anything, they have a right to a speedy trial. And it's only if they and their attorneys waive that right that trial can be
All right, but here's where my legal background comes in. There actually is a charge. The Israelis want him extradited. The Israelis have claimed he's a terrorist. The charge isn't that he's done anything in America. The charge is that he's done something or is complicitous in something that's been done in Israel.
Excuse me, but I meant specific charges. In the United States, you can't arrest someone for, quote, being a terrorist. You have to cite the time, the place, and the law that he has broken.
Well, with the new laws, apparently you can, because it's been done. Without the new law...
No, because it's because of his particular status. I don't believe that they could do this to your neighbor.
Without the new law, this man lived in the United States
Are you talking about the law
14
that
years.
just passed?
He lived in the United States for 14 years. He went back and forth to the Middle East.
That was the point I was getting to.
Then Bill Clinton, for reasons we can get into, declared Hamas a terrorist organization.
Let's get into them, because that was my point. That essentially now we have domestic policy in the United States being driven by foreign concerns. Not by the foreign policy concerns of the government, which would be bad enough, but actually by foreign interests. And I expand that. It's not just Israel. I think Egypt plays a role. Imam al-Asi correctly identified the situation with Sheikh Omar. The issue there is, if you look at the specific charges against the Sheikh, he is essentially accused of teaching his interpretation of Islam. Anybody else can teach their interpretation of their religion. It's not against the law. It's not the same as committing specific violent acts or actually being involved in the specific planning of terrorist acts.
Bottom line, law is being used for political purposes.
Exactly, and it's going and will be used under the new counterterrorism bill, and not limited just to immigrants or residents, but can be used against citizens.
All right, Dr. Youssef, you, I believe, see Mr. Abu Marzook weekly in the prison in New York. You go up there often and see him. You know him personally. What would he say if he were responding to this question? Why should Americans care that one man has been arrested and may be extradited to Israel?
Yeah, actually, I interviewed him last week, and I raised this question: why actually did he come to this country in the beginning? And he told me this is his country. He lived in this country for 14 years. His kids living in this country, and he has nothing to do with the American politics. So he just a political figure living in the Middle East, the leader of a political organization. He fought for liberation of his country from occupation, which is legitimate cause and supposed to be by the United Nations laws, and also in a country like the United States promote democracy and human rights, like what we usually heard. Somebody like him will come to this country and try also to seek or maybe he tried to play a role to be a bridge between the American agenda and some interest in the Middle East, because Hamas has a publicity in the Muslim world, and they got support from all over the Muslim and Arab countries. Somebody like him, I think he gonna be a great asset to the United States to try to open dialogue with him. Something as an American, I would like to wonder. This is a political figure. This guy who never commit any act of violence coming to this country, because he has a business in this country. The question I would, if I am American, I would raise this question: why this guy is incarcerated? Or in the beginning, why they arrested him? If they have anything against him, why they don't?
Okay, but we really know why he was arrested. We know that he was arrested because the Israelis asked for him to be arrested.
Our political policy is that much tied to Israeli agenda. This is the question: is our politics drawn in Israel, or the people, or dictated from Israel? This is the question. If I am American, I will raise this question: is our policy dictated in Israel, or in our interest here?
Maybe none of you are going to say so, but maybe as an American Jew, I'm maybe a little more free to say so. We all know the power of the Israeli Jewish lobby in Washington. We all know that Bill Clinton, as president, was promoted by that lobby. We all know that the president of that lobby resigned during the last election campaign when he was overheard in a secretly tape-recorded conversation claiming that a dozen people from the lobby had infiltrated the Clinton campaign headquarters, and that when Bill Clinton was elected, he was going to do everything the Israelis wanted him to do, which is pretty much what many of us who write about foreign policy have concluded. So there's no secret why he was arrested. He was arrested.
Our vital interest is in the Arab and Muslim countries. So I should consider about our vital interest in the Arab world. Arresting somebody like this will endanger this strategic and vital interest.
Well, now that's what I want to know. Just how are American vital interests going to be jeopardized because the political leader of Hamas has been put in jail and may be extradited to Israel? But as specifically as possible. I mean, it's not just enough to say that there's injustice being done. It's not enough to say there's a powerful Israeli Jewish lobby. If Americans are really going to be concerned about this, they want to know how their interests, both the country's interests and their personal interests, are going to be harmed, threatened.
Well, look at it from this, not just Abu Marzook alone. There is a trend here in the country now, especially with the Clinton administration, that harassing and the Islamic organizations, Arab American organizations, to satisfy the needs and the foreign needs of the foreign country, which is Israel. If we look at it from perspective as an American, where our interest lies. We have a lot of interest in lies with the Arab countries, with the Islamic countries, which is represent actually over 1 billion people around the world, and not with the one country, which is a small country compared to this, that it's in Israel. That's one area. The second, the Muslims everywhere, when they see that kind of a trend, more and more they're going to see it as they will give up on America, which is America supposed to play the role of being the strongest democracy in the world, to promote these kind of ideas and promote democracy around the world. How are they going to trust the United States to, even the people, not talking about the government, the people of the Arab world and the Muslim world, to trust the government that's saying something and doing something different, completely. They cannot make up their mind which is the best interest of their country, which is whether with Israel or with the 1 billion Muslims around the country. And if the trend continues on, it's going to create ill will, and there are going to be probably even some hard feelings in the Arab countries and the Muslim countries that could pressure those countries, or some of them there might even be some military coups in some countries just for that purpose alone. And then we're going to have start like what happens in Iran, which we've seen that happen, and with the American policies were all together with the Shah, not going with the interests of the people. And now we got another regime that we start complaining about, and we start saying, well, this is what they're doing and this and that. That could very well happen also in any country in the Arab world and the Islamic world. When they're saying, then we're going to start cleaning up and start cleaning the mess, and all this only to satisfy the Israel.
Well, speaking of the Arab world, we actually have a representative who I'd like to ask to join us from the Arab League, an old friend, Ghassan Bishara. excuse me. He'll tell us himself what he has to do with. And Dr. Yusuf's going to give up his chair. We're old friends, but we haven't been in touch for a while. And we'll take away your name tag, Ghassan Bishara. I'm Mark Bruzonsky. I'm your host for this program, Mideast Realities. We're in Lower Manhattan, outside of the Metropolitan Correctional Center, where Dr. MOUSA Abu Marzook has been for the last year. We're with his attorney, one of his attorneys, Ashraf Dubani, who has been working on this case, which is the case of the political leader of Hamas being arrested here in the United States, and the Israelis have asked that he be extradited to Israel. And Ashraf, tell us about the case. Tell us a bit about the case and about how your client is doing.
Well, briefly, I mean, in terms of the case, it's been going on for almost a year now. It started when he was arrested at Kennedy Airport because he was on some watch list of the United States government, and subsequently, the Israeli authorities, it was actually the Israeli cabinet, asked that he be extradited to Israel, and we're doing our job in fighting the legal battle, but obviously, you know, it's a political case as well, and it may very well be settled politically rather than legally.
Well, it is a political case, and there isn't really a lot that's being done politically, is there? The Islamic community in this country doesn't seem to have much potency.
Well, in the Islamic, it goes beyond the Islamic community, of course, but there has been, you know, some support. People who have been aware of the case have donated money to the legal fund, have helped the family, have sent Dr. Abu Marzook cards, but in terms of mobilizing politically, they really haven't had the opportunity, because no one has taken a leadership role in terms of deciding what should be done on the American level. In terms of what's going on in the Middle East, obviously many things are going on behind the scenes. We don't have access to all that information, but Israel never really wanted Dr. Abu Marzook in Israel. They were content to have him in prison where he's been neutralized.
Out of circulation.
And they're quite happy with that situation. They'd like to see this drag on for a longer period of time, because they don't have to give up anything in the meantime, because all they're doing is the beginning process of asking for his extradition. They haven't yet tried him, you know, and because bringing him to Israel would be a problem. Having him tried would be a problem. If he was found guilty, it may be a problem, and I don't think that the Israelis want that headache. And the United States is happy to accommodate by keeping him here, letting him go through the whole legal process.
But what this is it's a part of the process of crushing the Islamic nationalist opposition and propping up the Palestinian secular Palestinian Authority. I mean, that's what this is all about, isn't it?
I think that's part of it, definitely.
And it looks to me like it's relatively successful. Hamas has been substantially weakened, it looks like, whereas the Arafat people have been substantially propped up.
Right, but who is propping up Arafat and who's propping up Hamas? In other words, the people what counts is the people on the ground in Palestine who they support, and obviously Hamas throughout this whole ordeal, Dr. Abu Marzook's ordeal and before, starting with the so-called peace process, Hamas, you know, is now gaining much more support. It's always been a movement amongst the people. So I think that yes, on one level, the American government and Israel have chosen to back Arafat, and in the view of the world, that's who's being backed. But on the ground, it's a totally different reality. I think when you attack people like Siraj and and
You're talking about the head of the Human Rights
The head of the Human Rights
arrested
Commission.
and tortured to everyone's amazement.
Everyone has come to his support on the ground in Palestine, including Hamas and including, the secularist opposition that opposes the authority, or people within the authority who have dared to speak out.
Well, fair enough. They may have come to his defense, but on the other hand, everybody's scared and intimidated also.
Obviously, because he's running a police state, and
Well, it's not a state, a police regime.
A police regime.
If we call it a state, unfortunately, it gives the impression that he's actually achieved far more than Arafat's achieved.
Right,
Something that he hasn't.
even if it isn't a state, but I mean he's running a police regime there, and that's why people haven't been able to. They've spoken out. I think there have been enough segments of the Palestinian population who have spoken out. Yeah, whether their voice is heard is one thing, but they have spoken out. So I think, in other words, just to conclude on that point, what's important is what's going on the ground. And I think on the ground, people are dissatisfied with the status quo. They're dissatisfied with the so-called peace process, and that's what's going to make the difference in the end, I think.
Do you think what is called the peace process is likely to collapse in the future, and that people like Dr. Abu Marzook are going to have to be negotiated with by the Israelis?
I think that in my mind there's no doubt of that. I think that's what's eventually going to happen, because I think that when we were speaking to him earlier, he made the point about Germany, for example, and he suggested Vietnam and other situations. If you want to solve a political problem merely by force, merely by passing resolutions, merely by getting the power brokers to implement a solution, it's only going to be a temporary solution. And if you don't solve the problem on the ground, what you have termed as reservations, if you don't solve the problem of the Palestinian people who are still really living under oppression, there's never going to be a just solution. And I think that Hamas, for the foreseeable future, is going to be instrumental in solving the problem in that area. So they're just going to have to recognize it. They can, everyone is going to have to recognize that.
Is what you're suggesting kind of like that in the 70s, the PLO came along, it was ostracized, it was criticized, it was declared terrorist, all kinds of efforts were made to push it under, and eventually the Israelis decided, for reasons that are complicated, they were going to deal with the PLO. Are you suggesting that in the 90s, Hamas is ostracized, Hamas is declared terrorist, Hamas people are arrested, but that the time is going to come when these are the people who are going to have to be negotiated with?
I think so. I mean, I think from my vantage point, from what I see, I think that there's no other possibility in the near future other than the Hamas card, because for one reason, it's not just because it's an Islamic movement. That's obviously the big part of it. It's an Islamic agenda and so forth. But on the ground, Hamas has been consistently speaking in a forthright manner about the position that they've always taken, which is against the status quo, because the status quo doesn't provide the full rights of Palestinians. They've always been speaking towards the full rights of Palestinians, and they continue to do so. And as long as they do so, they're going to incorporate more and more, as opposed to losing less and less ground.
But the Israelis, what are they going to talk to Hamas about? Hamas wants the refugees to return. It wants the people to be able to return to their homes and their villages. It doesn't accept as a just solution the two-state solution. It says we want the Israelis to withdraw for now, and then we want the Palestinians to decide in the future. Right. So what are the Israelis going to talk about with Hamas? A secular state, a unitary?
Obviously now they don't even. It's not even in the agenda to talk to Hamas. Why? Because you still have Arafat, and as long as he's there, or the PA is there after he's gone, as long as that mechanism is there, I think that Israel will milk it for all it's worth. But beyond that,
and by the time they finish milking it, they may control all of the land. as they do west of the Jordan River. The Palestinians may well be on reservations, and there won't be any need to discuss futures because the Israeli intention is to keep control of the area.
Right, and I'm not going to say, you know, that if that situation continues to deteriorate, you know, that there's going to be another intifada. But what I am saying is that what did cause an intifada, the situation on the ground, will cause a new set of circumstances if the situation continues to deteriorate. Meaning that, you know, whether it's an armed struggle or whether it's countries even outside outside of Palestine. Meaning, you know, something may happen in Egypt, something may happen in Jordan, which would change the situation.
Things are going to change, maybe in a big way.
I think that
You're just waiting for your moment.
I think if you ask political analysts these days, they will say that the future is going to be a future where the peoples of the Middle East, the Arab people of the Middle East, are going to have a bigger say in government. I think that the governments that are in power now are not going to be in power for long. And you know, I'm not going to. I can't say 5 years. I can't say 10 years.
That in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, these regimes have stayed around for quite a long time.
But I think it's a different scenario. The only reason I'm optimistic is not just because I am optimistic, even though I may be an optimistic person. I think that the situation on the ground in the Middle East leads to that. I think that you know, the status quo in Egypt can stay for so long, and the status quo in Jordan can stay for so long, and then things have to change. And it's about that time. I mean, King Hussein has been there since 1952.
That's exactly my point. That regime has stayed, the Saudi regime has stayed, the Egyptian regime with all kinds of turmoil has stayed. Only in Sudan and Iran has there in fact been...
Because the West, America at its head, and obviously with its client state Israel in the region with its own interests, but the interests meet, they've divided the area. They've done so well, and we're living in that in their success. But I'm just saying that it's not going to continue, and I can't determine the time, but it's going to change.
If you believe that the Palestinians are entitled to armed struggle against the Israelis who are now occupying Palestinian land. The reason I asked you that is because in your 60 Minutes interview, the interviewer kept asking you, do you support terrorism? Do you support terrorism? And you kept answering, you have to ask, why do people do these things? And at least in the interview they broadcast, you never got an opportunity to explain why people do these things.
Yeah.
So I'd like to give you that opportunity today.
You see, the word terrorism itself, there is no definition for this word. If you look at 20 years ago, there is no such thing used at all for any people who struggle for his homeland or for his freedom. Nobody can use this kind of words against anybody.
Reagan was a terrorist. He had a wanted poster. The British, Shabir was a terrorist.
The ones who in the position, power position, you see,
Who defines it?
who define that? The British government, they defined terrorist force so and so because they killed some British soldier at that time, or David Huttage. But this such word, you see, is very difficult to define. Until now, there is no certain definition until the people you see recognize that definition.
Well, how about you use your words? Tell us in your words
We are
what it is.
fighter in reality, and we are freedom fighter. We're just looking for our freedom for my people, their rights to claim their rights to establish their government. They have right to return to their homeland. We really fight for Palestinian hope. That's as simple as it is.
Does that mean that if the Israeli, supposing Yasser Arafat's regime for one reason or another wasn't there, and the Israelis had to find somebody else to negotiate with, we all know they tried the mayors in the 70s, the village leagues in the 80s, they tried everything before going to Arafat, and then they only went to Arafat when he was bankrupt and had no choice. Either it was I resign or I cooperate. So
the reason why Arafat he has this kind of power, because there is organization behind him, and those people on their solution before Yasser Arafat, there is no organization support those people, the mayors or such thing. There is no organization support their solution. He partially succeeds Yasser Arafat in this kind of agreement because he has organization behind him. This is the main reason, and if there is no organization, for example, if there is election among the Palestinians about this solution, he will never come up with...
Yes, I know. At Year 8 University, Hamas gets 43%. Every time there's a popular...
Even the universities which Fatah used to run it, like Year 8, for example, Fatah used to run this kind of elections 30 years ago in Year 8 University. Now they lost the last election. They lost it.
But what I'm trying to get at is you've described yourself as the Jerry Adams of the Hamas movement. I think you use that because Americans can understand that kind of analogy. Sinn Féin wants to sit at the negotiating table. They are fighting to sit at the negotiating table. What is Hamas fighting to do?
In 1994, in the interview in Jordan, I said that clearly. We want Israel to withdraw from Gaza Strip and West Bank, and this is Hamas struggle for right now. And after that, they should run an election among the Palestinians to choose their leadership.
But that's the same position as Yasser Arafat.
No.
He says he wants them to withdraw from the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
But you see, Yasser Arafat, he started to maybe this is his aim, but he will never come up with his aim in his situation right now.
So you support his aim, but not his
But
tactics.
his tactics is completely wrong, you see. Right now, what he's just a guard for the Israeli security people there. Look at what kind of situation among the Palestinians right now in Gaza Strip and West Bank. Now, their situation worse than the situation 10 years ago, you see. This is a very difficult situation. Economic-wise, security-wise, education-wise, everything now is miserable. Because his situation, his tactic is completely wrong. Nobody agrees with his tactic. This is the main reason. But Hamas want, after the withdrawal from Gaza Strip and West Bank, to election. Who win that election? We're going to respect what he's going to decide.
But isn't this really the goal that the Americans and the Israelis, in the name of peace and in the name of separation, they essentially want to put the Palestinians on reservations, on Bantustans. You get little chunks of land that are disconnected, that are not sovereign, and the Palestinians are supposed to accept that as the best they can get. And Yasser Arafat is their Indian chief, if you like. Is that a reasonable analogy?
You see, I think now it's very clear. In the situation, he used to say some words and do something else. And I don't think there is any difference between Perez and Netanyahu and the Palestinian question. There is no difference. But what's the difference? Perez, he used to do his history, his political history like this. He used to say some words and doing something else. And what's happened with him in the last 4 years, that's exactly what happened. But Netanyahu is very clear. He said there is no withdrawal from Gaza Strip. There is a complete withdrawal from Gaza Strip. There is no withdrawal in West Bank. There is no divided Jerusalem. You see again, there is no Palestinian state. It's a very clear situation among the Israeli and among the Palestinian now. But if the Israeli, even though withdraw from Hebron next month or those days, I don't think this is the situation, this is the solution, because the normality for any kind of army to withdraw from the cities. No, you see if there is any army in any kind of city, usually the army used to be out of the cities. And that's what happened. If they withdraw out of the city and control everything after that, what's kind of Palestinian situation after that? It's very difficult.
But in theory, it sounds like you support the two-state solution. If the Israelis were to leave the territories occupied in '67, agree to UN Security Council resolutions, accept a Palestinian state with flag and seat in the UN, then you as the political leader of Hamas, from what I understand, would sit at the table, negotiate, and there would be mutual recognition.
That's what we want right now, to solve the problem in this way. After that, the Palestinian people, they have to decide what the future will be.
Just like the Israeli people are doing.
Yeah. This kind of conflict, you see, you have to come with a solution among the people. It is a big mistake to go to the table with just hope or just idea as a leader. You have to recognize what the Palestinian people wants. That's what Hamas wants. They want Israel to withdraw, and they want Palestinian elected their leader in Gaza Strip and West Bank, and after that they decide what the future will be.
But half of your people are living in refugee camps or in the diaspora outside of Palestine and Israel. So these people aren't going to accept.
This is one of the biggest problems we have to negotiate. Those people, they have right to return to their houses, their villages.
The houses are gone and the villages are gone.
But the problem you see until now under the Israeli constitution, they want any person who's he is Jewish, he has right to return to Israel. I don't understand why.
Yes, they keep arguing with me that I should continue to get the
Why you born in New York, for example, and you have right to live in Israel. I'm born in Palestine. I don't have right to go back and live there. It is kind of a strange situation. Why those people who born in their homeland they didn't have the same right to go back to their country and live there?
Agreed, but the question I'm asking is, in 1996, after all that's happened, for the Jews, there was the Holocaust, there were the wars for the Palestinians, there was the dispersion and the defeats. Are you as an individual, I understand you're saying to me the Palestinian people must decide, but have you come to an appreciation of why so many of the Jewish people also want to have a state, rightly or wrongly?
Yeah, I know. I read Jewish history from 7,050. I know exactly what's happened to the Jewish. But if you come to the question, the Jewish problems, they never have this kind of situation, you see, or problems among the Jewish in my country. They have most of the problem with the European country. Most of the
Holocaust was Christian anti-Semitism.
Not only the Holocaust. Look at what's happening in Spain, for example. This happening the same thing. Everywhere the Jewish in Europe, they order the government armies there to move from this country to that country. If they take from this country, the other country may accept them temporarily, and after they kick them. This is the situation.
But that's past. Now it's Hamas bombs in Israeli cities, and it's Israeli army beating and torturing and killing. Now it's Jews and Israelis killing Palestinians and Muslims.
This is not the end of the war. It is not. It is just part of the history. The Palestinian question is still there, and the Palestinians is still there. And if there is no solution for their problems, if the Israelis have the power right now, there is some solution for this kind of power. There will never the Palestinians surrender because the Israelis have the power right now. This is not the solution.
But their power is pretty overwhelming, including the fact that they have you here.
Yeah, I know. I recognize they have a power right now, but this is not the solution. They had the power before in Palestine. As they said, they had many years controlled the area, and the King Suleiman, he was, you see,
It's before my time.
At all. I'm a freelance journalist, Palestinian journalist, American citizen, and like you said, we've known each other for quite some time. So the bottom line is I'm not employed by the Arab League.
The bottom line is actually that I can vouch for the fact that you're an extremely thoughtful and provocative and honest and candid person about these issues, and so I'm eager to hear from you. Why should Americans be concerned that this gentleman is sitting in prison and might be extradited to Israel?
Well, I mean, I think I've been listening in on to what's been said. There isn't really much that I could add, except for the fact that I think your interrogation, your attempt to prod things out, I think I would answer that by saying the following. I think in the Middle East, the United States has learned that it can have its cake and eat it too. It can be a friend to the declared enemy of the Arab people and the Arab governments, and it still can have its interest thriving in the Arab world. It's no secret, really. I mean, we know that. And I think all of your questioning, which is very well stated and put, and I think it would not really have to be questions if the Arab world reacted in such matters in line of what their interests are and who defines those interests. According to certain Arab governments' interests, the interest of the Arab world is being served by what is being done. If you see the reaction of the Arab people to various things that are done by the United States, it's in total disagreement with the majority of the Arab people. Disagree totally, in my opinion, with many of the Arab government's reactions to this. So in this case, I think you're right. I think the United States can have its cake and eat it too. It can have its interests in the Arab world thriving. It can sell billions of dollars to various Arab countries in commodities, in cars, and whatever else. It can purchase Arab oil. It can have its bank host billions of Arab dollars, Arab money, and still it can assess what the Arabs perceive to be their enemy, Israel, and from American point of view, it's fine.
All right, but isn't to an extent the fact that there was a revolution in Iran, that there is a Hezbollah movement in Lebanon, that there is a Hamas in Palestine, that there is a revolution in Egypt, that there's been civil war in Algeria, aren't these things in fact tied together? And aren't we seeing a historical reaction? Isn't there a building confrontation between American and Israeli interests in the Middle East and the perceived interests of the people of the region? And you're shaking your head a lot.
Absolutely.
But this is a question for everyone. And let's open this up. You don't have to rely on me to point my finger.
You see, let me just respond to what I started saying earlier. That is the gap that I'm talking about between Arab governments, many of which are unfortunately unelected governments, and their people.
We agreed before you came to be extremely candid and call it straight, so you can call the Arab governments, especially now that I know you're not working with the Arab League. You can call them whatever you want. Most of us call them despotic, ruthless, certainly unrepresentative and undemocratic, and police states.
Yeah, I mean, all I would say is that they are really unelected. They apparently are not representative of the majority of their people, and what you just pointed out to is some, or maybe the beginning of a reaction to fill that gap between the action between their governments, which is supposed to represent their interests, their feeling, their best interests to the outside world, and what is in fact being projected by those governments. And the gap is beginning to appear, and I think the movements that you pointed to are in my opinion, an opposition political parties, opposition groupings under whatever guise, whatever title, whatever, but they are opposition parties to what has been taking place in the Arab world. And I think you're very correct. They're growing, they're multiplying. Just one has to just watch what has been happening since the Israeli attack on Lebanon. It's like the pot is really boiling in the Arab world, from Yemen to Tunisia to Egypt to Jordan to everywhere.
And is Hamas, at least in part, a reaction to a generation or two generations of British and American imperial interests in the region? Let's talk about Hamas, because after all, Abu Marzook is the political leader of Hamas. He's in jail because of that.
I would add, I think, to the point that Hassan was talking about. Actually, the American policy cannot have, its cake and eat it too. Because for long, it's known, you cannot put the people down forever. That's a fact in history, we should learn. But coming back to this here, the Israelis, of course, trying to use all these, we just talked about this situation with Hamas and Algeria and all these things, and use it and try to convince the American government and the American policymakers that they have to go 100% with Israel and forget about the Arabs, because sooner or later the Arabs or the Muslims are going to turn against America. And this, of course, serves only the interest of Israel, and that's one of the reasons that they wanted Abu Marzook. And the Israelis, I believe, in their calculations, they know that they have no interest in Abu Marzook. I think going even there is not going to really serve their interest per se as far as Hamas concerns, or putting down Hamas organization. But they're looking for a broader interest, which is trying to alienate America from the Arab world and the Muslim world, and they will be leaning more toward Israel more and more. And this is to the best interest of Israel, but it's not to the best interest of America. And that's what comes in again, the question you earlier raised, why Americans should care. The Americans should care because this is exactly what Israel is doing, trying to tilt America 200% with them and 100% against the Arabs, and at the end it's not going to serve the interests of the country.
I'm concerned about another alienation as well. That's the alienation of the American people from the American government. As the American government becomes more absorbed with fulfilling the interests of foreign countries, then instead of having the much called for democratization of the Arab governments, instead what I see is an Arabization of the American government. People have been referring to this. People have noticed this alienation, but they've attributed it to issues about, economic centralization and things like that. And that may be a part of it. But I think there's also the issue of the civil liberties that we talked about before. And I think there's also the issue of feeling among the American public that the American government is not operating for their interests, but is operating for the interests of whether it be Israel or Egypt or whomever. And also, I find it interesting that some of the same groups that lobby for the interests of Israel are ones that lobby, for example, for gun control and other measures that have become highly inflammatory in recent years, resulting in even terrorist acts taking place in the United States in the aftermath of Waco, for example, and caused not by Middle Easterners, but by Americans of long standing.
I'm Mark Bruzonsky, and I'm the host of this program at East Realities. We're talking about Hamas. We're talking about the arrests of the political leader of Hamas. And I'd like to read just one short paragraph from the conclusion of a publication that was published here by the UASR. The scenario: America, pressed by Israel, arrests Hamas leaders and jails or extradites them. Either action would attain the same result. Hardliners in Hamas will target U.S. interests. forcing the Americans, theoretically, to crack down on all Palestinian Muslim activities, charitable, media, and political, on its soil, and pursue Islamicists abroad. This publication was written last year. Now in 1996, some of this already seems to be coming true. There have been statements in the Middle East recently about taking Americans hostages and making Americans pay. How serious is this, or is it just a lot of the kind of rhetoric many Americans have sort of come to expect from the region?
Well, there's a lot of things. Let me try to take this on. There's a lot of expressions concerning the Middle East that tend to be rhetorical, but in this particular context, I don't think that we can dismiss this as rhetorical. And I would like to broaden that statement. That statement says Hamas may be put, or paraphrasing it, Hamas may be forced to take retaliatory action in the form of terrorist acts against Americans, etc. Looking at the larger picture in the Middle East, I don't think it's only Hamas that's being forced to resort to these types of drastic or radical actions. We can add to Hamas other areas in the Arabian Peninsula, in Lebanon, in northern Africa. I think, see, it's comfortable to look at the Arab-Israeli problem and then begin to point out extremists. The Jews have extremists, the Arab side has extremists, and once these extremists begin to do their thing, then nothing can be solved. Well, what we are seeing here is the United States government joining the extremists. When the United States government is taking sides against a legitimate party to this so-called dispute, in the fashion that it has done, it has classified itself. And this is where...
You're speaking about Hamas.
I'm talking about the United States government in its approach to the whole Hamas phenomenon, and in the arrest of Dr. MOUSA Abu Marzook. Before the arrest of Dr. MOUSA Abu Marzook, there was this ambiguity area. The United States government may have passed, and this is questionable, but let me put it across, may have passed as a type of fair arbiter in this dispute between extremist Muslims and extremist Jews. But when the United States went on the offensive, and this can be easily interpreted by Muslims throughout the Middle East, arresting Dr. MOUSA Abu Marzook, arresting Sheikh Omar Abdurrahman, passing laws in Congress that are intended specifically against Islamic organizations and Islamic associations in the United States. This gives credibility to those who are saying that the United States is a great Satan. And so the United States right now has joined the extremist flux in the Middle Eastern issue. It no longer can pretend to be equal-handed towards these and equal-handed towards those. The United States policy, and let me add here before it slips me, that it's not a precedent in the Middle East when you take someone who belongs to a political military organization, that this political military organization is going to react against perpetrators of unjust acts. There were American ambassadors killed in the Middle East because of taking Israelis taking prisoners. There were acts against American interests in the Middle East because of Israeli aggressive occupational military policies in the area, and hence the United States used to be on the receiving end when it was blindly supportive of Israeli policies. Imagine what the United States is going to be receiving if it jumps the Israeli policies and places itself in the forefront of initiating acts of aggression against people, individuals who belong to the other side of this issue.
The irony, of course, is that the United States is treating Hamas now exactly like it treated the PLO for a generation before the Israelis decided that they were going to deal with the PLO.
This is a point that deserves some clarification and explication, because I think that one of the things that people forget in treating Abu Marzook as if he were a terrorist, people are going against his role as a political leader. And one of the things, if you want an enduring and lasting peace process that's successful, you want to be able to have a loyal opposition within Palestinian society. No one in Palestinian society is in a better position to fulfill that role right now than Hamas. But Hamas is being denied the opportunity to fill that role. And in particular, all you have to do is look at the recent elections. A condition was put on participation in running for the highest offices that people had to approve over the peace process in order to run. The Palestinians. This was not applied to the Israelis. The Likud could run for office and will be running for office in the upcoming Israeli elections, even though their attitude towards the peace process is at least as hostile as that of the Hamas.
But isn't that the issue? Isn't the issue that the Israelis have found their interlocutor? They want to deal with Yasser Arafat because the deal they can get from Yasser Arafat is a deal that no other Palestinian leader is willing to accept. So Hamas is being ostracized because Hamas has a following within Palestine but will not pursue the kind of peace process. So in the end, we talk about the peace process. So in the end, we have to explain that for most Palestinians, it looks like they're being put on reservations, not that they're being led to statehood.
Exactly, and for the United States to be taking sides in that asymmetric way makes the United States not look like an honest broker at all.
But the United States has never been an honest broker. I mean, why am I the only one here who's willing to say the Israeli Jewish lobby has control of the situation in Washington? We all know it. Are you reluctant to just say it plain and simple like that?
I'd like to make a comment basically on the historical issue of the U.S. interest, or the way the U.S. has perceived its interest in the Middle East. What's being done now to Hamas is the same thing, or the creation of an enemy in Hamas, which is the U.S. has just crossed that threshold. The precedent for this is what was done in Lebanon in 1982 and 1983. Because the United States got involved in the Lebanon war and took sides, after Amin Gemayel came to power, the United States explicitly took his side, sent in troops, started bombarding his opposition, and thereby created enemies in Lebanon that didn't exist before. Basically intervening in an intra-Lebanese conflict, taking sides and then becoming a participant in that conflict, an active participant in that conflict, and setting the Hezbollah directly against the United States. Now at this point, the United States had always been an indirect, supporter of Israel in terms of the aid and the military support and the political support, but by taking direct actions against Palestinian leaders like MOUSA, Abu Marzook, it has now crossed the barrier of inserting itself as a direct actor in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the side of Israel. And so it's, I think that what you mentioned, Mark, about this paragraph here, about the potential threat to U.S. interests based on the new opposition of Hamas, I think that if it were to happen, it would be because the United States declared Hamas an enemy. If we remember back in 1993, the United States, or prior to 1993, the United States had a dialogue with Hamas and then cut off that dialogue because they defined Hamas as a terrorist. So this creation of a conflict is being started on this end. Now I just want to expand on that point and talk about why I would say that the U.S. policy itself is a function not only of the domestic circumstances that you talked about, but also it's a function of the balance of power in the Middle East. Like what Ghassan Bishara was saying, until there is either an incentive or a disincentive to not completely identify with Israel, the United States will completely identify its interests with Israel. And the proof of that will be that if Dole comes to office as president, you're going to see exactly the same policy as you saw under the Clinton administration, not what you saw under a previous Republican administration. So until the Arab states or Arab peoples are able to assert their interests, their local interests, in a strong enough way, the United States has no reason to divert from this policy whatsoever. We can't expect that change is going to come from within. It has to come from the change in the will, if you could say that, of the people of the Middle East.
You're saying might makes right?
Of course, I identify it, first of all, because it speaks for the justice and the rights of the Palestinian people, which, as a Palestinian, I feel that they're addressing my needs and my rights. Of course, their Islamic agenda is taken out of context in the sense that this is part of the Palestinian people and part of the region, that it's natural that Islam plays an important role, yet there's no division between religion and state, and therefore people feel that all they're doing is practicing their lives, whether someone from the outside terms it as religious or as Islamic as opposed to secular. That's their problem, not
We're not
ours.
talking about just religion. We're talking about the main issue for many women is that women are put in a certain role, a certain dress code is enforced, a certain relationship to men in society is enforced.
Right, but actually it's not enforced in the sense that it comes from a dictate up from some government official. It's a woman chooses to practice the religion and therefore chooses to wear what is called the hijab, the Islamic dress. And if you look, for example, if you look at the situation in Jordan as compared to, for example, let's say Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, they're required to wear Islamic dress. Sometimes what happens is when females, not all of course, but some females, when they leave the country on a plane, they may decide to take off their Islamic headdress and they go out to wherever they're going as, like any other person in the West. In Jordan, where people are not forced, they're not forced to wear it by the government, you find that the overwhelming majority of people in Jordan, of the women, choose to wear the Islamic dress.
That's not the issue. The issue is, what about those who choose not to wear the Islamic dress?
Those who choose to wearing the Islamic dress represents modesty for the woman. In other words, that Islam does not say the laws of Islam as dictated, we believe, by God, do not tell us to go spy on people and seeing whether they're drinking in their houses or whether they're good Muslims in their own homes and so forth. But at least in society, there has to be a semblance of peace. There has to be a semblance of purity, of modesty, and so forth. And the Islamic dress is a part of that.
What about those who are Christian and don't? And what about those who are Muslim and who don't want to observe your code of modesty?
I think those groups who traditionally have not been Muslim, meaning Christians in the areas and so forth, since they've lived with Muslims for centuries, have some of the same moral and traditional sense of modesty as do the Muslims. In other words, that I don't think that a Christian who's been living in Palestine would mind wearing the dress.
Modesty is definition, just like terrorism is definition.
Right, in Palestine and in Muslim countries, it's defined in a certain way. And I think
Islamic societies are known for enforcing social and cultural rules on everyone, whether they agree with them or not, which is the exact opposite of what's done in this country that you are citizens of.
But
Right now, we'll see women in shorts, we'll see women in hijab, we'll see women in skirts, we'll see men in suits, we might see a man jogging by. But in your country, in the country you want, in the country Hamas wants, they want to enforce a theocratical and dogmatic.
what we would term theocratical, yes, but like I said, to the people there, if they choose this form of government, and Hamas has made it clear that they want free elections, in the sense that, in other words, if the people decide that they don't want Islam as an implementation of law, they don't want it as a tradition, I think that Hamas would be wrong to step in their way. In other words, if they don't want it, that's fine. We call people to what we think is right, like everyone else calls people to what they feel is right. And those who end up in terms of leading the people in the end, it will go back to what the people decide. As to the issue, but as to the issue that you addressed in terms of the Islamic dress for women and so forth, the point is that, again, because we don't differentiate between the secular and the profane, the religion and state, what happens is that Muslims living in a community decide to give up some individual rights for the benefit of the community. We can make that decision if the majority decides that that's what they want to do. In other words, there will be a minority, some of them may be Muslims who decide not to practice the codes of Islam. Some of them may be Christians or secularists, and they say that we don't want to wear the hijab, but they're going to have to give up individual rights for the benefit of the community. We may not agree with that here.
Who now live in the area of what you call Palestine. What about all of them? Are they going to also live in an Islamic state, just like some of the more radical Jews insist everybody must live in a Jewish state?
That's why I think that some people have been throwing up, I don't know who they are, but I've heard it, the idea of one state and two peoples. In other words, that if there's a state under the rule of the Palestinian majority, choosing to rule themselves, and Jews decide to live in that state, they're welcome to do so. Those who can't accept Palestinians ruling themselves and ruling the Jews who live there will decide to pick up and go back to New York or to wherever they...
I think they'll choose to live in an Israeli Jewish state.
But that's what right now the Jews as a group, they have the benefit of living in they have dual citizenship. They, for example, here in the United States,
most of them do not.
But they've been brought in.
Only Israelis.
Hundreds of thousands of Russian Jews have been brought into.
Some are.
Hundreds of thousands in a country. Okay, 20%. That's like saying
let's talk about
out of America when we're a population of 280 million, whatever it is. When you say 20%,
I'm not going to let you off the hook on this one.
When you say
I'll grant you the 20%. Let's deal with the 80%.
The 80%. I think even the 80%. I think that the Jews who live in Palestine, the Israelis who live in Palestine, feel that they are still foreign to this country. They will say
up to them to decide what they feel. When you ask them,
those people
they say they want to live in a Jewish Israeli state.
I think those that lived in Palestine before 1948, they've always had the right. Jews have always had the right to live in Palestine, and they used to come in varying amounts of numbers during history, during the course of history. The point is, those who came after, I don't recognize their right to live in the state.
Exactly the problems. If there is any right election, or if there is any kind of democratics among the Arab votes, the complete situation will be different. The complete situation will be different.
There aren't any elections.
But there will be, and I don't think the future will. There's dynamic in that history. There's static and dynamics. Sometimes dynamic, sometimes static. But there is another future coming up. You can't imagine.
Tell me more. What is this future you foresee?
I know exactly what's going on. The Arab regime, when they establish themselves, most of them come to the power because of the Palestinian question. Most of the people they govern their countries right now, when they come to the control of their countries, for example, the Nasser revolution, when he came to the power in Egypt, he came under the Palestinian question. When Assad came to his power, he came under the Palestinian question. When you see...
Certainly Arafat came to power that way.
All of them.
Hashemites pretended to support
even though the King Hussein and his family controlled Jordanian there because of the Palestinian question. The Palestinian question is the biggest question in the Middle East. And the people there, they will never accept something just come because there is the people who govern their countries, they want so and so. The people they know the history exactly, they know who's right, who's wrong, and if there is any kind of situation, everything will change. Look at Iran, for example. Iran used to make very good relation with Israel.
Our strategic ally.
Right. That's before the Khomeini.
And this isn't my time.
Now look at the Iranian position against Israel. Now look at the Turkey, for example. This is the present situation. There is a completely different situation if the party win the next election, for example. Israeli with Turkey relationship will be completely different.
And from Algeria
I
to
think
Egypt.
Egypt, I think there is completely another situation if the Israelis decide to continue deal with the Palestinian in this situation. The war is not the solution. When you think the solution coming from your muscles, you completely wrong.
Well, it sounds very reasonable to people who know history and who have traveled and met people on the other side, but it does not appear, you were saying Netanyahu and Peres aren't that different.
No, but I know that in their heart. You know, look at Rabin Meadow. When Netanyahu get elected, what she said?
She wants to come live here in New York.
To leave Palestine.
I assume that they many Palestinians happy.
Not this only. This is what they feel. Most of the Israeli feel they are not completely Israeli. They are partially Israeli, and the other part Western. Now, how many Israelis go to the Russian embassy to elect Yeltsin? 50,000 Israeli, most of them soldiers, went to the Russian embassy to elect Yeltsin. What does that mean? Most of them, they come to this country and they don't belong to this country reality. But how many Palestinians now are suffering in their country and they never thought they're going to get out of their country?
Fair enough, I understand.
And now the Palestinians suffer, or maybe they have very good opportunity and very good economic-wise, and they live in good situation in the Gulf, and the only hope they want to return to their country. You have to recognize that. Most of the Israelis, when somebody come to the government, they want to go back to where they're born or their fathers were born. And the Palestinians, even though they have very good situation outside Palestine, they want to go to the Palestine. This is the reality, and this is what we should recognize.
But I want to take you 7,000 miles to America. You're incarcerated in America. America is Israel's ally. America gives Israel the money and the weapons that make it possible, political support that make it possible for it to do what it does. Speaking to Americans, what would you say why America should change its policy? America thinks things are just fine. We're in control of the Middle East. We get all the oil we want. We get a lot of investment, a lot of economic trade. The Israelis are our close ally. Most Americans think things are fine.
Yeah, but when you come up with the American deal and the American situation, always the media made the Arab or make a picture for the Palestinian as terrorists, that they are fighting for something not their right. The Palestinian just fight for fighting, and they are terrorists. This kind of situation, the media make a picture for the Palestinian in this way. This is in the media situation, and when you come to the administration and coming to the elected point of view, you see they're looking for the lobbyists and who are going to support the president to win the election and all of this kind of situation. It is nobody come to the question of right or wrong, or justice or freedom. They didn't recognize all of these kind of
those are not positions that we apply in China. They're not positions we apply in Russia. Justice is for writers and thinkers and academics. If you don't have any power, Machiavelli wouldn't...
Even though if look at the American interest, also the American interest is with the Arab wars, not with Israel. The American interest really, most of their interest there with the Arab, not with the Israel. But on the other hand, the problem when you come to the groups here in the United States, the Jewish have the biggest group and support any kind of situation there, or a president will be elected. He will never be elected without that support from those people. Then the situation has come bad for Palestinians because of this, not because they don't have right to live or to struggle or to establish their country.
Don't you think it's going to stay that way?
You see, maybe now the America is superpower, but 10 years ago it was dual superpowers, not just the United States. And I don't see the United States, if they stay maybe this is the history now, right now. We're going to recognize that the United States is a superpower there, but they can't decide what they want without understanding what is there in the Middle East. If you come to the many questions right now in Balkan, for example, in Bosnia and in Somalia, there is many area United States decided to do so, and they didn't success because they have to recognize all of the parties in any part of the world. Even though in the Middle East they have to recognize the Palestinian cause, the Palestinian rights, the Palestinian land. If they didn't recognize that, there is no such solution come up. Even if the administration of American presidents decide to support Israel in any kind of solution to Israel.
Maybe the Americans don't want a solution. Maybe it's nice to be selling a lot of arms. Maybe it's nice to be needed for political negotiations. Maybe it's nice that each Arab state and leader is divided from the other. Maybe an empire like the United States likes things the way they are.
But you see, Vietnam, this one is very big situation there. It is, if you have a big weapon and if you have a very advanced airplane and something like that, these kind of things, it is not coming with a solution. You can hurt others, the other part, you can hurt the people, but this is not a solution.
You mentioned Vietnam. The Vietnamese were able to push the United States out because the Vietnamese had military force and political organization.
If you compare between the Vietnamese at that time and the power of the United States, there is a big difference between both sides almost.
Yes, but the Arabs don't have military force or political organization.
But if you know geographical...
They have geography.
Yeah, but the wide of Israel is just 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers.
That's why they want to keep the West Bank.
Yeah, I know.
You're going to make their argument in a minute.
You see, the struggle in the Middle East never needs sophisticated airplane or atomic bomb or any kind of things. If the Arab decide to struggle, it's completely different situation. It's completely different situation.
You haven't said this, but tell me if this is what you are saying. You're optimistic because you believe the will of the people and justice will eventually prevail.
And the problem is still there. The Palestinians until now, they are in refugee camps until now. You see, if you go in the refugee camp and you look at your family and your people in the miserable way, the first question comes to you how to solve your situation. It's not you see to go to take vacation. I never thought to take vacation in my life. I have been I'm 47.
You don't know what vacations are?
I never in my life thought there is a vacation I have to take. Because when you see the Palestinians in this kind of situation, you will never think in this way. You will never think how to solve the problem. That means that the problem will still there.
Is Rafah the camp where the Intifada started?
No, Jabalia.
Jabalia in northern Gaza.
It is worse. It is the worst refugee camp in the Gaza Strip.
There's Beach, Jabalia, Rafah. Well, Rafah's a city, actually. It's the city on the border with Egypt.
Yeah.
And that's where Canada camp maybe still is.
Yeah, that's another problem.
I've been to the gate and everybody's shouting at each other. Right.
Yeah, look, my family now divided two parts. In the beginning, in 48, they divided two parts. One part is still in Israel now, and the other refugee to Gaza Strip. After the Israeli withdrew from Sinai, they divide the Rafah two sides. One of them belongs to Egypt, and the other, my family is divided another time. This is the second time my family, you see, divided by the...
But you're making a crucial point, because the Israelis have, in 2 generations, they've succeeded. They've divided the Palestinians territorially, they divided the Palestinians politically, they've divided the Arab world into sections. Under those circumstances, you don't have much power.
Right, but what kind of power have the people in Kazakhstan and Armenia and all of these countries they controlled by Soviet Union 10 years ago? What kind of power they have? They have nothing. But the regime itself is collapsed, and suddenly there is many states come up there, and without any, you see, struggling even though. Maybe the Palestinian doesn't have right now the power, but maybe to solve the problem there is many ways to solve the problem, not only...
Well, for instance, please, this is our opportunity. What are these ways?
They belong to the Islamic wars, they belong to the Arabic wars. It's not only just Palestinian there. They are part of the region. That region is as unity from the beginning. From the established as the Islamic world, they are one region. There's one people. You will never come with this question without feeling what the Egyptian people think about the Palestinian and Jewish or the Israeli there in Palestine. You will never think what is the Saudi Arabia people think about this kind of question. They will never let the Palestinian go away just because the Israelis are power right now. There is always the children of the world.
Hasn't Arafat and the PLO signed away a lot of the rights of the Palestinians, and aren't these documents now accepted by much of the world? Arafat and the PLO have signed peace treaties. They have accepted...
There is signed that, right?
Well, the government of Israel signed it.
No, there is signed, but now nobody recognizes that in Israel. And they decide Netanyahu, and Netanyahu said, no, I'm not going to respect...
So you're suggesting all these documents in White House meetings...
It's just a paper for Rabin also, Netanyahu. It is just a paper. What the last statement for Netanyahu, what he said? I will never let some kind of paper like this to threat our security.
But you say the same. Netanyahu disavows...
Because this is the reality. The reality is will never come through papers of the people who sit there and then go. No, the future comes with the rights, with the justice, with the freedom. If there is a justice, if there is a freedom, if there is the people that their rights, there is no reason to fight. But if you
if I may say, the Israeli model. I think Mr. Clinton is consecutively, progressively has been, as of now at least, the most American president that identified with Israel interest. And I think it is obvious that in the media and political analysts, American political analysts and Middle Easterns see him as himself, perceiving himself and his ability to get re-elected as weak, and therefore he wants to look for the strongest, in his perception, party in the United States that can salvage his second term. And from that point of view, we realize more and more or he does more and more things that would be satisfactory to what he thinks are Israeli allies in this country, American Jews and other Americans who are allies of Israel.
So why is it that a state of 4 million Jews in the Middle East, 6 million Jews in America, seems to talk about realpolitik, to be able to outmaneuver 23 Arab states with 200 million people, and you yourselves as Arab Americans, you have 4 or 5 million Arab Americans. Where is the incongruity here? Why in the world are you so weak?
Well, let me give you one response to this. This needs more than one response, and it needs more than the short time that we have. But one response to this is that, unfortunately, we who belong to the anti-Israeli part of this equation, whether we are Palestinian, whether we are Arabs, whether we are Muslims, we on this part of the equation have a whole area of forces that are stacked against us, from the United States administrations, Republicans and Democrats, to the Israeli government with its military build-up and prowess in the area, to the repressive and autocratic dictatorial types of Arab and governments in the Middle East, whether these are Arab countries or beyond. So we're really working on different fronts. As far as the Israelis are concerned, they have almost the same forces that we are working against are working for them. The United States governments, Republicans and Democrats, the Israeli governments, Likud and Labor, and the Arab governments, whether they are kings or presidents. All of these are stacked on the Israeli side.
Does that now include the PLO?
Of course it does. The PLO, if it is given further credibility, it will emerge just another Arab state. It would be similar to something like a cross-reference between Egypt and Jordan. That's the Palestinian National Authority. You can see the Palestinian National Authority...
Maybe you're being generous.
Maybe I'm being generous, but the American public out there needs this generosity. We would have to build the bridge for them to understand. The Palestinian National Authority, the first thing it concentrated on was a police force. 39,000 policemen and security agents that the Palestine National Authority has in the West Bank and Gaza. What do you want a police force when you're coming into existence? If you are coming with the will and the consensus of your own people, why is all the budget going to the police around? And there's no other concentration, no other interest in the other sectors of society.
Maybe to infiltrate and repress the people, what you need are police, informers, money, and guns.
Now, you're being generous by using the word Navy.
You know, Mark, if I also may add something here, I mean, it's obvious that Mr. Arafat's authority, there are certain very, very bottom line ABCs, and one of them is when your adversary is beating your people, you try not to meet with that adversary. The same day that Israel bombed the UN compound, Mr. Arafat was meeting with Mr. Peres and shaking hands. Today, in the 11th or 12th day of the Israeli bombardment of Lebanon, the bombing of water reservoirs, the bombing of power grids, Mr. Arafat is calling upon the PNC to meet and to recognize that it's a different ball game, that we have to reconcile with Israel and make peace with Israel. Apparently even within the Palestinian Authority territories themselves, the gap is also growing and widening between Mr. Arafat and his people.
Are you saying...
are demonstrating, are protesting, students are protesting, and he doesn't apparently really, he doesn't care because of
are you saying
5 or 6 levels of police force and security.
Simply, the PNA is not a representative of the Palestinian people so much as an auxiliary of the Israeli occupation force.
Actually, it's been called the Haddad. No, it's been called the
Well, Edward Said has said collaborator. Edward Said has said a Vichy-type government, like Vichy France.
It becomes like Haddad militia
In southern Lebanon.
The Israelis themselves call it the subcontractors of their security.
That's the word.
Do you people on this panel foresee the day in the foreseeable future when the Israelis will have to negotiate with Hamas?
Well, the way that the Israeli authorities behaving is, it would prefer to cease to exist before negotiating with any Islamic trend in the area.
I was going to say optimistically, that's the way I would see it, because pessimistically, the Israelis are going to arrange it so that no negotiation is possible.
That's not what the...
I would say that if the PLO, I should distinguish between the PLO and the PNA. I think that's a very important distinction. The PLO represented 6 million Palestinians worldwide. The PNA represents 2 million Palestinians, technically, I mean in terms of being an official entity within the West Bank and Gaza. So I think it's very important to make that distinction.
And what does Hamas represent?
Hamas represents an opposition to that official policy. If Hamas were to take over there, then Hamas would also represent those 2 million people officially as a replacement authority for Arafat's. But the point that I really wanted to make is that I think if the PNA does not survive, if it is wiped out by this process, the opposition or the collision between Israel and Hamas, in which it's currently standing in the middle, I don't think that Israel will negotiate with Hamas. I think that Israel will look to Jordan to help it to cut off Hamas. I mean, the object of them is to destroy Hamas and not to negotiate with it under any circumstance.
And what's the goal of Hamas?
The goal of Hamas is to probably get some kind of a national self-determination and equitable type of future for the Palestinian people.
I think that Hamas represents an idea, and as to how many people it represents is a reflection of how many people are embracing that idea, something that polls are being taken from time to time and the numbers go up and down. And as the PNA becomes discredited, more and more people are embracing the idea and are de facto represented by Hamas.
I think I disagree. I think I will disagree on this point. I think Israel will negotiate with Hamas at one point. But Israel, they try to milk it all the way until they get whatever they want from the PLO or the PNA for that matter, because the PLO, to my understanding, I think died.
Isn't the real goal of the Israelis to divide and rule, just like when the British first came to the Middle East? They played one Arab state, one Arab ruler off against each other. And now Israel's playing one Arab faction and one Arab group off against each other.
Of course they're going to do that, but to the Israelis, I think they come up from different colonial point of view. It's not like the colonization of the British and or other countries, because Israel is there on the land, is going to stay on the land. They don't consider themselves as colonials per se like the British, which is they can move back to Britain. Israelis, they consider this as their land, and they go from the zero-sum politics. They don't go from the different politics, either us or them. That's how they look at it for this point. And that's why I see it. I think the Israelis, as a matter of fact, in my opinion, they kept their dialogue with Hamas now, going in the territories where they had in Gaza, where they kept their connection with the leadership of Hamas and the political leadership, of course. But Israel, they won't negotiate with Hamas unless that the military wing of Hamas would be modified somehow, somewhere where to their liking. But at the political position and political level, I think Israel will negotiate at one point or another with Hamas, because they recognize that Hamas represents more than just a military wing. It represents, to their estimate, even at one point when they had dialogue with the council, the council of Israel in Chicago, in his estimate, they said they represent about 30-35% of the people, at least. That's just,
And if Israel does negotiate with Hamas, it's probably going to negotiate with
someone like Abu Marzook, and that's why it is really Israel in this point even. That's why I believe Israel, they did this. I don't think they're interested in Abu Marzook as to get him to Israel to get him for any trial. More or less they're trying to break that kind of things, and they try to negotiate with him. That's one of their probably reasons they want him back there, and that's quite possible, because Israeli politics is not the normal politics like we see in the United States or any other countries. The Israelis, they look at everything is in different perspectives, completely. It's not somewhere in between. Whatever it's the best interest of Israel, they will do it regardless who would like it or who doesn't like it. That's how the Israelis look at things.
Against their land, against their people. They try in 20 years establish everything, and they make another war, big war, and how many millions get killed for their mistakes. And when they divide Germany for West Germany and East Germany, after 50 years, it's reunited. You can't make solution just because you are in the position of power. You can't make solution.
Do you think in the future a single state in which Jews and Arabs live together is possible?
It's possible. This is the past.
Not the Israelis I know, or very few of them, but
if they decide to be among, you see, this kind of terrible situation all of the time, I think they can decide, but they will never success. They will never success. They may be success now because from the beginning, the superpower, Britain, Russia, and United States, they support their ideas, but you don't know about the future. Who's going to be the superpower? Who's going to be running the Arab quotes? Who's going to control the Palestinian people? You don't know the future.
More than 30 atoms of Hamas, do you aspire to negotiate with the Israelis a just settlement rather than the ones that have been negotiated?
You see, the Israeli, they ignore the Palestinians in the past, and when Yasser Arafat right now, he signed the agreement with them, they decide to talk with him. Look at the last movement with the Qatar as the what was sent 2 days ago. They want to halt all of the situation. And the Israelis said no. I don't know the Israelis themselves. They will never, you see, think in this way. The Israelis just think of their muscles. There is a Palestinian side to negotiate with them. I'm not right now in a position to say this is there is a negotiation or not among us, but there is in reality there is a negotiation between.
Well, the Israelis are trying to extradite you. You'll be right there if they succeed to negotiate with them.
Yeah, there is another negotiation.
You and the head of Hamas is still in jail in Israeli prisons, isn't he?
Yeah, he's touched.
I've never met him, but he must be in his 60s, and he's ill.
Yeah, he's completely violent.
And is he a friend of yours, a personal friend?
Yeah,
I would assume. I want to talk about the United States some more. You've lived here 15 years, and before you've lived in this facility for the last year, you were in the suburbs of America, meeting Americans, I assume, every day. You worked in business.
The judge said I am flying in New York airport until now. I didn't land it until now.
Well, you did a lot of traveling.
No. He talking about his 10 months. In his decision, he said, I'm not in the United States, I'm just in New York airport, I'm flying there.
I see. But I wanted your candid impressions of this country. And candid, I don't mean, say nice things that you don't really believe. What are your impressions of this country? After all, this country is the one that made Israel's policies possible. Your country is in the situation it's in because of this country, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not because of this country as a whole. It is because of the administration. If you look at recently, the two administration, Bush administration and Clinton administration, it's completely different. It's the Bush administration, it is at that time there is American policy in the Middle East, and now there is Israeli policy in the Middle East.
Before Bush, there was Reagan. He signed strategic agreements with Israel.
Right. But you see, even though that agreement, it is completely different situation coming up with the American administration right now. That if you compare that agreement, for example, between Israel and Egypt with the agreement between Syria and Israel, it's completely right now there is different position. If you want to apply that agreement to the Syrian and Israeli side, they have to withdraw completely from the Golan Heights. This is not the situation right now. It's not the position of Israel, and maybe it's not the position of the United States. It's completely different.
If if you don't blame the people in America and Israel, if you blame the administrations, the governments, then nevertheless, your movement, the Hamas movement, whether or not you knew about it or whether or not you were involved in it, your movement is killing civilians in these countries. Your movement is using what the world calls terrorism to blow up buses, to blow up shopping centers. So there's an incongruity here. If you blame the governments and not the people, how come it's the innocent people who are dying?
Right, but the Hamas, they never struggled or fight outside Palestine at all. They only
just process growing up in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, but even though this kind of situation, Hamas never decided to do so because they want to do. They decide when the army, when they did that, because the Israeli hurt the Palestinian civilian. And always there's a situation coming up with them. We will never hurt any citizen if the Israeli stop hurt the Palestinian civilian. This kind of situation is never strategic or tactic for the army wing to kill civilian, because nobody likes to kill civilian anyway. Nobody likes to harm the innocent people anyway.
Let me give you an example.
But if the Israelis stop, and this is what the request.
But let me give you a clear example. In January, the Israelis killed Yahya Hayash.
Right.
Now, he was not a civilian. He was clearly a person involved in Palestinian military activity. He didn't wear a uniform because you don't have uniforms. The response of Hamas was not to kill an Israeli soldier somewhere or not to even assassinate an Israeli political leader. The response of Hamas was to blow up buses in the streets of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and shopping centers.
If you don't look at only indicate what is the end of the point, you have to look at the whole situation. The whole situation at that time, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority decide to stop all kind of this
Before Hayash. Sort of an informal ceasefire.
There is nothing there, 7 months. But when Israel start to do so, to kill the people, then the military will start to respond for their policy. You have to look at the whole situation, not only part of the situation. And even though right now, I don't know why Israel not respect what they signed in their agreement to release the prisoner in Palestine, and everything will stop there. And this is what the military said 2 days ago. If you release,
What did they say?
They said if you release the Palestinian prisoner and lift the siege on the Gaza Strip and West Bank, we're going to hold this kind of armed struggle. And Netanyahu today refused the request, even though this kind of request, it is what there is in Taba to release all of the prisoners.
Okay, but there's another incongruity here. You have a reputation for being the most moderate Palestinian, among the moderate Palestinian leaders, among the moderate Hamas leaders. So how come you are here? If you're among the most moderate, why are the Israelis targeting you?
This is a completely different situation. Israel, they never asking for extradition anytime. I have been here 14 years. They didn't ask that. My name is never mentioned in any court in Israel, and they know that. And maybe the Israeli request, the United States request to Israel to do so, because my extradition case comes through not from the Justice Department, it's coming through the Israeli cabinet. The Israeli cabinet decided to extradite me after the American arrested me in the airport. There is no such thing before I came over here. away from the Israel to United States. After the United States arrest me without any reason, then maybe they didn't find anything to put it in my case.
They do have a reason. You're the political head of Hamas, and Hamas has been declared a terrorist organization.
No, this is not the situation. Because, first of all, I never moved from the United States to other countries and returned back undercover. I always moved under my name and under my title.
Like Jerry Adams.
Most of my visit from only the Middle East countries. It's not only officially visit. I never visit those countries as a tourist. I visit as the political leader of Hamas to meet. They have tourist group which call as the Qassam.